This week, I want to talk with you about a growing trend in violence that you have to be aware of. And that's the fact that we are seeing a higher and higher percentage of violent attacks perpetrated by multiple assailants. So many videos of late, in the past few years, it's not brand new, but certainly the past several years, we've seen the escalation in surveillance videos, videos taken by people on the streets with their phone, etc., where we're seeing assaults, violent assaults committed, violent robberies, etc., committed by multiple assailants, sometimes flash mobs and quite large groups of people. It's not uncommon now to see home invasions committed by five, six, eight individuals, sometimes armed with long guns. So, this is something you need to be aware of. I think many concealed carriers still think we live in the era when the primary threat you were likely to face was a guy in the Walmart parking lot who tries to rob you, an aggressive homeless guy who tries to rob you, a junkie with a switchblade in a dark alley. Listen, that era is past. That can certainly still happen, but the norm that we are seeing now is multiple assailants. I have seen many surveillance camera videos of three or four guys at a time carjacking people, approaching the vehicle from several sides. Um, People accosted on the street by groups of, very depressingly, groups of teenagers. Sometimes we'll see large groups of teenagers committing violent attacks, and certainly in the domain of robbery in different public venues, jewelry stores, clothing stores, pawn shops, etc. You will see large groups of individuals. Uh, it's not unusual to see 10 or 12 individuals come in and loot a large store. So, all of this is the result of having several years now of government at the federal, state, and local level that do not prosecute criminals. So you incentivize criminal behavior when there's no penalty for it. So when you have policies in place where you can steal up to a certain amount and not be prosecuted at all, or if you violently rob places and individuals, the if there is any prosecution, it is a slap on the wrist. We are now, as a society, paying for our stupidity. Well, probably not you, the person watching this, but those we live among who are stupid enough to keep voting for people who address criminality in this way. Okay, and I'll give you a clue. It's usually the same people who desperately try to disarm you and would have no problem putting you in prison for the guns you own. Those are the same kind of people who don't prosecute criminals. Violent assault, violent robbery, no problem. You're right back out on the street. Okay, so because of that, we see criminals emboldened and they are working in large groups together. So, you, as the prepared citizen, the armed citizen, how should that affect your preparation? Well, obviously, you need to be aware of what's going on around you. Obviously, you should try to avoid locations where this is more prone to happen. If you don't have to be in large cities on the subway system, my advice is certainly don't be there. But ultimately, no matter how good a job you do of trying to avoid things, bad things can come to you. Violence can find you, obviously. So, if it does, again, remind yourself that we are no longer living within just the paradigm of the junkie with a switchblade. We are now living with the paradigm of we might be facing three, four, six assailants who are committing a violent assault or a violent robbery, etc. Um, if you can get out of any kind of situation like that, obviously do so. But if you are forced to use force, I think you need to be thinking in terms of how is your training? Is it up to that? Do you know the tactics involved with dealing with that? Do you have the skill with your handgun to deal with that? I think also you should be thinking about what kind of gun you are carrying. I love small frame revolvers. I still carry one, when I walk the dog, around the house as a home carry, when I always am close to a full size pistol and a long gun. Okay, but I think you really should consider wisely when you are out in public where these things can happen, carrying a real fighting gun. If you can only carry something small, or if you're only willing to carry something small. The good news is we are in the golden age of very capable 9 millimeters. These now what are called micro compacts, typified by the SIG P365. It's a great gun, shoots surprisingly well for its size, and there's a whole variety of them now. The Springfield Hellcat is, by all reports, quite reliable. The M&P Shield Plus. My top recommendations in this domain would be the SIG P365 or the M&P Shield Plus. If you want something very small but is still a standard capacity handgun now, we're talking about 10 or 12 rounds in the standard magazine for these little guns, and they're in 9 millimeter and shoot quite well. That is a huge step up from a 5-shot J frame if you're facing multiple opponents. Okay, if you can carry more than that, stepping up to Glock 26 size guns or the M&P compact, or if you can really swing it, stepping up to the Glock 19 and M&P size guns. Now we're into the true, just south of service size pistols, right? That can really do realistically anything service size pistols can do. So that's the kind of weapons we need to be thinking about carrying when we are in public where things like this can happen. And I'll go back to, I would say now is the time to reconsider, or maybe consider for the first time, carrying a backup gun on you. For me, the backup gun, which I don't carry all the time, I will carry a backup gun when I am in public where I have to be around a lot of people with the family. That tends to be the only time I will carry a backup gun. I put a revolver on my ankle. This is where the small gun like a revolver comes into play. In case I have to arm a family member or somebody I am with if things get really bad. So that's something to consider. That is something that might be more valuable to you realistically than having a rifle as a truck gun, that kind of thing, because you never make it to that gun in the vehicle. You're going to use the gun that you're wearing. So these are things to consider in this very depressing but very real heightened threat profile we're in, where multiple opponents, multiple adversaries, multiple attackers, that is the new normal. Just look at the crimes being committed. That is what you need to train for. That's what you need to be prepared for.